Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is David Phillip. David is a national correspondent for the New York Times, where he covers military, veterans, and the Mountain West. His work appears in publications such as the Chicago Tribune and Los Angeles Times. He's also the author of three books, and today we will speak about his latest book, Alpha, Eddie Gallagher and the War for the Soul of the Navy SEALs. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
So I was reading your book, and it's almost no different from watching an action film. The way that you build the story and the background of Eddie Gallagher, and then of course how things start going wrong, it's just it's gripping. But I wonder if we could start by you telling us a little bit about your background. How did you get into journalism, and how is it that you got interested in this sort of stories?
Sure. Well, I've been doing newspaper writing for a long time. I started 20 years ago, almost exactly, and I most of my career I spent at a small newspaper in my hometown, which is Colorado Springs. And Colorado Springs is a big military town. It's got a huge Army base called Fort Carson. It's got the Air Force Academy, and it's also got two other Air Force bases. So my friends, my neighbors, a lot of the people around me were in uniform. And so that meant that when I started writing about this community and through its newspaper, I learned a lot about how to write about the military. And I wrote about it really from the perspective of not necessarily about war, but about the people that make the military up, because I knew them. I would see them every day. And after doing that for a while, I think I caught the attention of the New York Times, who decided they needed someone to do something similar for them. And they hired me in 2014. And I've been doing that for them since. So writing about the military is endlessly fascinating because it's a huge community. In the United States, we have more than 2 million active duty military members, and they do all sorts of different jobs. You know, most of it is not shooting. And so I write about them in the way that other New York Times writers might write about a foreign country or a certain region of the United States. I just try to tell the little stories that reflect a bigger story. And when I saw the story of this group of Navy SEALs that had turned in their own platoon leader for war crimes, I didn't know what the story was going to be, but I knew that something really important had happened there. And it was worth paying attention for two reasons. One, in the military, loyalty is extremely important, and it is so unusual for a small platoon to turn in one of their own, especially because in the chaos of war, which often takes place thousands and thousands of miles away from here, without much outside accountability, it would be really easy just to stay quiet and cover it up. So I knew something there had happened, but there was also something else. I knew that the Navy SEALs in the American imagination they had become heroes, almost angels. During the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, they were really elevated to a level where we thought they could do nothing wrong. And yet at the same time, we in the public knew very little about what they actually did, because everything's classified. They don't have to tell us anything. They just tell us, we get what goes on from them just from their own stories that they published and podcasts that they run. And that gives us a very whitewashed version. So I knew, okay, these guys have turned in their leader. He's being charged with murder, attempted murder, a whole bunch of other crimes. Whatever happened here, and I made no assumptions that he was guilty, whatever happened here, they're gonna have to hash it out in court. And court is one of the few places in the military where the public is welcome and the public can listen. And so I knew, okay, we're going to get to listen and hear something about the Navy SEALs. And that is going to be really interesting.
Well, in your first of all, to go back to your own personal story, what is in particular that drove you towards journalism, especially living in a military town where I assume there are posters about joining whatever affiliation of the military is? And I don't know if you watch war movies, but as a young kid, that's something personally that I wanted to do as well. Wear a uniform, carry a big gun, and kick some ass.
So I also like loved watching war movies as a kid, but I never wanted to join. I don't know what that says about me. I was fascinated about it, but like it seems kind of dangerous. Like I was more thinking that I would get my ass kicked if I did it. But I also was really like fascinated by it because it told you so much about who we are as people. You know, when you put people in extreme circumstances, you see the best and the worst. I think I had just always had the instincts of a writer, and so I was just happy to watch things, to describe things, to try to understand things. Now, I never thought that I would end up writing about the military at all. But right when I started my career in newspaper was when the war in Afghanistan started, and then the war in Iraq. And in our community, the town where I was working, Colorado Springs, you know, we had tens of thousands of people deploying and coming back and deploying and coming back. And it really had an impact on our community. It was the biggest story of that time. You know, if I had grown up in another time in another city, I probably would have written about something else. But that was really the thing that needed to be understood and talked about. And, you know, 20 years later, I've got enough expertise on it now that it's sort of become what I do. And it's like I said, it's endlessly fascinating to me because I have so many feelings about it, both that war is tragic and a racket and does nothing good for anyone, and that I've repeatedly had these experiences where the people that are actually doing that work are some of the best people you'll ever meet. You know, I enjoy spending time with them, listening to them, understanding them. And so those two things together really continue to fuel my interest.
Okay, so you are a reporter, and now most of the activities of military men, they are not actually shooting people. They are doing clerical work, they are doing logistics, whatever. However, the things that the media reports about are the dangerous activities, and considering that there is a code of silence and a loyalty, maybe how do you pierce through that layer of silence and secrecy to get a real story out of whatever event happens to be going on?
Uh, so you're absolutely right. I think that any organization, any small group of humans will be reluctant to talk to outsiders, and the military especially, because what they do, I think they really fear we won't understand back here. So a couple things. First of all, with that code of silence, you accept as a reporter that you're going to fail often. There are going to be stories that you try to access and you can't see that as a reason to give up, because, you know, occasionally you'll get lucky. And most often when you get lucky is when two allegiances are in conflict, when someone in the tribe believes that their own values are being violated. And so what I have found is that someone, maybe you'll be able to connect with someone in the tribe, whether that's a platoon or whomever. And if you can build a relationship of trust with them, they will become a bridge for you to other members of that community. And especially in a very insulated community where trust and loyalty is high, the word of a trusted member of that community is the best credentials I can have in terms of being able to talk to other folks. So that's what I've used over and over. Build trust with one person, let that person build a bridge to other people.
Well, since you report and this is your field of expertise, do you feel that the face of military has been changing since World War II, for example, where everyone put the same uniform and went to war together against another team or another army. And then in Vietnam, for example, it started being more like a group operations. And now with all this war in Iraq and Afghanistan, is teams like the SEALs team who do the dirty work, or drone pilots, and there is not that huge one army against another kind of warfare anymore.
Yeah, I actually think as time goes on, we'll probably look at uh, Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam all as part of the same chapter of these counterinsurgency wars we tried to fight really in the same types of ways, and it didn't work out. And yeah, there's some cultural differences and some technology differences, but there's so many similarities. And in fact, one of the things that I found in my research is that the Navy SEALs really got their start operating in Vietnam, doing a lot of the same dirty work you described in the jungle there, and that culture and that type of fighting was really passed down through generations and used in Iraq and Afghanistan too. I don't know how we'll come to view these wars, whether our culture will see them as a huge mistake, or there will be some things that we want to try and preserve from them. But certainly, like, you're right, this is a very different type of war where a lot of times it's very quiet. You know, it's not big battles. We're trying to hold on to a country that keeps slipping through our hand like sand. And the people that are actually doing a lot of fighting, which is pretty rare, are these special operations folks, like the SEALs and a couple other groups.
Well, my knowledge from the SEALs and other groups comes almost exclusively from movies. So for my own benefit and the benefit of the listeners, can you define what is the Navy SEALs exactly?
Sure. Think of them like the military SWAT team. They're a very, very highly trained group of people who work in small teams to do what they call direct action. And what direct action means is maybe to go into a target and assassinate a known enemy, or capture a known enemy, to go into a target and rescue a hostage. It's a very sort of precision, fast and hard operation that they're trained to do. And there's not very many of them. So like I said, the military is more than 2 million people. There's about 2,000 Navy SEALs, all organized into these little teams that at any given time any given time are sprinkled all over the world and ready to do these high value missions.
I wonder if you, it seems like many Navy SEALs after retirement, they write books about their adventures. I just read one not too long ago. I think it's called Can't Hurt Me. And I wonder if you, as a reporter of warfare, if you are also addicted to this kind of books.
So what's interesting about these books is, you're right, there's a ton of SEALs that once they got out of the military wrote a book. And some of them have become pretty wealthy off of this, especially folks that wrote books about corporate leadership and what lessons you can learn from the SEALs to run your company better. What's interesting is there's a real cultural divide in the SEALs about that. In their values that they all learn while they're in uniform, one of the things that they learn is that they're silent professionals. They're not supposed to advertise the nature of their work. So a lot of SEALs believe that the book writing, the telling of war stories, stuff like that, violates their values and is only done for personal gain. And so there are thousands and thousands of SEAL veterans who have stayed silent and disagree with this type of practice, but you would never know it because they're all silent. And so the people that decided to not follow that silent professional ethos are the ones who are speaking for the SEALs. But it should be noted that there are a lot of people out there who quietly disagree with what they're doing.
Okay, I have no idea about that. Well, can you tell us about Eddie Gallagher and how he went through the ranks? He he saw an advertisement, joined the Navy or the SEALs, and he felt driven. And then what happened?
Right. So Eddie Gallagher is the focus of the whole book and of the murder investigation. He was arrested when he was 39, and he had been in the Navy SEALs, or sorry, he had been in the military since he was about 20 years old. So he was almost 20 years into his career, and he had worked his way up, starting as a Navy medic, and then becoming a Navy SEAL. He had deployed to Iraq. He'd been to Afghanistan twice. He really, his entire adulthood was spent in the wars after 2001, and by 2017, which is when all this stuff went down, he had risen to the rank of chief, which is E7, and he was for the first time put in charge of a group of men. And the men who he was put in charge of, when they first heard this, they were excited about it, because Eddie Gallagher had a reputation in the ranks as a kind of a fearless professional, a guy who didn't care too much about the bureaucracy and the fine print of the Navy, but cared a lot about men and was brave on the battlefield and had a lot of real experience. So they were happy to have a guy like him as a boss. And that changed pretty abruptly when they all went and deployed to Mosul, Iraq together to fight ISIS, because what they describe is that very quickly he kind of came off the rails and started acting in ways they would never expect.
Well, I mean, this is a speculation, but can we categorize this as mental health problems? I mean, there is the gore and the glory and the ego as well. Like as far as I know from my reading of military books, there is a certain pride of how many kills do I have? How many nicks can I put on the armor representing, and that's the true rank, not the insignia that you have on your shoulder, but how much exposure I have had to the real stuff.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. What Gallagher's men say they saw him do in Iraq is they saw him start to use a sniper rifle to indiscriminately target, essentially what one guy said was anything that moves, old men, women and children, clearly civilians. And they also say that they saw him execute a wounded prisoner in cold blood. So why would you do that? And is it a sign of mental illness? That's really a question I think that this book asks but cannot answer. And I'll tell you what I mean. Was Edward Gallagher always someone who was interested in killing people and killing them in cold blood? And is that why he wanted to join the SEALs? Or was he brought into the SEALs sort of as an average Joe, and then a culture around him that celebrated killing and celebrated, like you said, putting notches on your belt for how many people you killed? And that's how you got reputation and stature in the culture. Is that why he did it? Or did all those deployments add up to a diagnosable mental health condition or a traumatic brain injury? And so all of those things are possible. And not only that, all of those things could be true at the same time, right? In varying degrees. You could be a sociopath and acculturated by a culture of killing and wounded in different degrees, or you could be any one of those things. And I was never able to fully untangle that. But I think that that's exactly the right question, is what are the factors that lead someone to become a cold-blooded killer?
Wow. Well, assuming that there is, not assuming, knowing that there is a culture of silence, especially among a tight community like this, what prompted some of the team members to turn him in? I'm sure they have all seen other slips of law or the rules of war, and they haven't reported. But eventually, it seems that it became so overwhelming that they had to step forward and just carry the message upward.
So, interestingly, the guys tried to keep it quiet. They saw him do killings that they thought were wrong. that they thought were illegal, that they knew were big trouble. But they didn't, the first thing they did was not go outside of the Navy SEALs and call the police. What they did was quietly talk to their leadership and say, hey, Eddie Gallagher's bad news. He did these bad things. You need to take care of him. And I think what they thought is he'd be quietly put at a desk somewhere and essentially forced to retire without anyone saying anything. And they thought that's good enough because at least he won't be able to do any more harm. But what they found is that their leadership really liked Edward Gallagher and didn't necessarily care what he had done and refused to do anything. And so he was going to go not only lead SEALs again in warfare, but potentially rise in the ranks and lead more SEALs. And they saw that as so potentially damaging to the organization that they had to do something drastic. And that drastic thing was go outside of their small Navy SEAL brotherhood and tell the legal authorities in the Navy. But that's not what they wanted to do at first. I think they knew that would be damaging to the organization and potentially themselves. And so they only did it out of desperation.
Right. Okay. And considering that we idolize this group of individuals, the Navy SEAL, how much of a tarnish to their reputation has this case brought upon them?
I think that's hard to gauge. Certainly, this is the first time in any big way that there's been a critical story about the Navy SEALs. As you mentioned earlier, most of the stories out there, whether they're Hollywood movies or best-selling books, really talk about the heroics of the SEALs. This gives the other side. And certainly, I think that the men in the platoon feel bad about that because they even after everything that happened, they love the SEALs as an organization. They want to see it healthy. But I think that they felt that some pain was needed in order to cut out the cancer that was Eddie Gallagher and his culture. And so they were willing to see that pain inflicted on the organization in order to try and come to some healthier outcome in the future.
Well, I don't feel like I'm spoiling the story of your book. Eddie Gallagher went to trial, and this is public knowledge. Can you give us your perspective of the trial, how this came about, or just a short summary of what happened?
The trial was really amazing. So like I said, he's charged with first-degree murder and a couple counts of attempted murder. And his trial takes place in the military in front of an all-male group of jurors, almost all of whom have ground combat experience. So it's almost like if you're a member of the police who's gotten in trouble for violence against a citizen, and the jury is all police. It's a trial with a lot of twists and turns, but the most striking one is that the key witness, a man who was inches from Eddie Gallagher when he says he saw Eddie Gallagher stab a prisoner of war to death. He suddenly changes his story on the stand. And he changes it in a very careful way to protect himself from accusations of perjury. But he says essentially, look, I did see Eddie Gallagher stab that prisoner, like I said, but it was a very light stabbing. I didn't see any blood. This guy appeared to be healthy after the stabbing, and he would have continued to live if not, and here was the shocking part, if not for what happened next, which is that I killed the captive, not Eddie Gallagher. And this SEAL was able to say that because he had worked out a deal to give himself complete immunity on the stand. And so even though he had claimed responsibility for a murder, there was no way to prosecute him. He was immune. And so he was able to both protect himself and Eddie Gallagher. And so I maybe this is all assumed, but afterwards, Eddie Gallagher walked. He was found not guilty of murder, attempted murder, all of the big charges.
Wow, that's loyalty there. Can you tell us if there was any influence from the previous president of the United States in this case?
So right from the beginning, Eddie Gallagher's family would go on to conservative media in the United States, especially Fox News, and would essentially on TV talk directly to President Trump, saying that what was happening to Eddie Gallagher was an injustice, that an innocent man who was only doing his job was being wrongly imprisoned, really laying it on thick and laying the foundation for a pardon. The president several times on Twitter, like as it was going up to trial, tweeted his support for Eddie Gallagher and made it known that he was really considering pardoning him even before he went to trial. Now, he didn't have to do that because, as I explained, at the trial, Eddie was found not guilty of almost everything. The only thing that he was convicted of was posing for a picture with the dead body of the prisoner. And after the trial, the president came in on Twitter. He congratulated Eddie Gallagher for the verdict, and then he essentially reversed the punishment. So even though Eddie Gallagher was convicted, the president shielded him from any punishment and let him retire honorably.
Wow. Okay. Other than sharing with us a great, amazing story from your journalism narrative and your investigation, what other objectives do you have with this book?
You know, so this book, before it was a book, was a series of news articles. I covered the trial piece by piece. And what never got into the news articles, and what I think is really the amazing part for me, is what an amazing and timeless story this is, not of Eddie Gallagher, but of all these men who served under him, who had to, as you said, decide what loyalty really means. And they came up with all sorts of different reasons, all sorts of different definitions that went in totally different directions. And it's a timeless story, a story of what do you owe to yourself? What do you owe to others? And when everything has been turned over and over so many times, how do you decide which direction is right?
I feel speechless. I mean, the story as you tell it now and as I read it in the book is completely gripping. I wonder if you could tell us one more time the title of the book and where can the listeners follow you or follow the work that you do?
Sure. So obviously you can follow me in the New York Times whenever you want. The name of the book is Alpha, Eddie Gallagher and the Soul of the Navy SEALs. And you can follow me on Twitter at David_Phillips.
You said that we could follow you on the New York Times. Is there any way that, let's say, I like you as a reporter, I can follow and get notification whenever you publish a new article?
Yeah, actually, you can. You can go in and search for the profile of each reporter that you want to follow, and you can get notifications whenever their articles come up.
David, thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you.